Hey guys, London system is popular, easy to play. I'm a big fan of this opening. I think it's really strong. However, there are certain lines where black can try to get some activity and create some counterplay, so we must be prepared. One of these lines is when they develop the queen to b6. This can be annoying because we developed the dark square's bishop early, so b2 is unprotected, but also from b6 the queen puts pressure on d4. In this video, I'm gonna show you my antidote versus this idea and a crushing miniature with a fantastic combination I won some days ago in this line. Let's get started. One of the main lines here is when black plays c5. They are challenging our central pawn, but also they are clearing the line so the queen can go to b6. Here we should continue e3. The normal move here is knight c6, developing, but also pressure on d4. Here the main line for white is c3, but as I know that queen b6 is very annoying, I want to show you the line I really like in this position. And it is a small change in the order of the moves. Here we don't play c3 directly. Here I suggest the move knight b d2. This is another line, but I really like this order of the moves. About the main line, when we play c3, I don't like it that much. When black plays queen b6 here, this is a little annoying here because we don't have a good way to defend that pawn on b2. I mean, b3 is just creating weaknesses on the queen side. Also, the square c3 could be a problem later in the middle game. Queen c1 is a theoretical move, but it's actually misplacing the queen a little. It's not the ideal for that piece. And probably the main line here is queen b3, but then black can play c4, and then we either trade queens on b6, which is not great. We don't get any real advantage. It's a position I really like to study, but we need to say that we don't get any real advantage as white here. On the other side, if we go to c2 like queen here, there is this strong idea, bishop f5. The idea is that the queen is the defender of b2, so if white takes the bishop, black is playing queen b2 and getting the rook. So we should play queen c1 here. Again, this position is fine for black. They are probably even slightly better here, so we don't get anything good for white in this line. So that's why I was trying to find a better way to play in these positions, and I decided to try knight b d2, and I studied this variation. Here black can continue queen b6, but the whole point of this line is that now we don't have the pawn on c3, so the pawn is fine, the pawn is protected, and instead of a pawn unprotected on c3, we have a piece already developed when our opponent plays queen b6. This means that we are ready to sacrifice one pawn and play for some interesting compensation. So in this position, after queen b6, we are going to play d takes c5. At this point, black has two options. They can capture the pawn on c5, or they can capture the pawn on b2. If they capture this pawn, that's actually a very pacific line. Here we can just continue with a normal development and a more or less typical London system position. We can just play c3 here, for example, and let's say 6. We can just continue with a3. That's also a typical move here, so we can save the bishop if black plays knight h5. One of the good things with this position is that black cannot play bishop d6 here because the queen is the defender and we can attack the defender, and probably we are getting the bishop. So after bishop d6, we're just playing here either b4 or knight b3, and then we are getting material up here. But even if black doesn't lose the bishop with a blunder like bishop d6, the fact that the queen is on c5 a little exposed there is probably giving white some small but interesting advantage in this position. The other line is when they take the pawn on b2, and this is actually the most popular move, the most played, and the most challenging idea. Because when they take this pawn, they are probably assuming they will also take the other pawn on c5, either with the queen or sometimes with the bishop. And this is true. They are actually getting the two pawns. So in the end, they will have one pawn up, but we will have a really nice compensation in the middle game. Here we will continue rook b1, and the best move for black is just queen c3, trying to get the pawn on c5. They can also take that pawn on a2, but that's not a really good idea. After queen takes a2, we can continue with a normal development like bishop b5. And this position, we shouldn't say there is compensation for white, we should say is much better for white. So even when black has like one pawn up, the activity white is getting here is more than enough compensation for that material down. Observe the king in the center, pieces undeveloped, but also the queen out of play. This is one of the main problems for black here. There are even some lines where the queen can get trapped. For example, here black can continue with e6. That's a very logical move, trying to get the pawn on c5. And there is this move knight b3. And here the threat is rook a1. And when the queen comes to b2, bishop e5. So for example, let's assume any normal move, like, I don't know, like h6. Well, we can play rook a1. And when the queen goes there, we can play bishop e5. And this is winning for white. Black is losing the queen here. But let's assume they see the threat and play queen a3, trying to escape over b4. Well, this time we can play a really accurate and strong idea. Queen d4. So the queen is not escaping over there. We are threatening rook a1 here. The queen is also controlling b2. So black is in trouble here. Bishop d7, trying to unpin the knight, doesn't solve the problem. We just take the bishop, the knight, and then we are playing rook a1, and this is getting the queen again. So as you can see, this line of queen takes a2 is really dangerous and is getting a really important advantage for white in the middle game. So the main line is going to be queen c3, and here the best moves for white will be either bishop d3 or bishop b5. Bishop b5, pressure over this diagonal. Bishop d3 is going to put the bishop active on this other diagonal. Also very interesting. It's a matter of like. In both lines there is enough compensation for the pawn we are going to lose here on c5. However, in the miniature I wanted to show you, I played something different. I played rook b3, which is not better than the development of the bishop, but in the end I got something interesting here. My opponent took the pawn on c5 and I played bishop d3. The right move for black is g6. They try to develop the bishop over the fianchetto, but also they reduce my light squares bishop, so there won't be threats with that bishop over that diagonal. Instead of that, he played e6, and this is dubious, and in this position there is already an interesting compensation for the pawn I have down. Here I just castled, and my opponent played bishop e7. I decided it was a good idea to open a little the position, as his king is still in the center, his pieces are still undeveloped. I thought e4 was going to be good. But also something interesting about e4 is that I'm clearing this line, so maybe later my rook could go to the king side and create some threats over there. The game continued, d takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, and then bishop takes e4, and my opponent castled here. Observe that I have a pawn down, and black doesn't have any important weakness in this position. However, when we analyze a little deeper, we can see that white pieces are extremely active in this middle game. I have the two bishops in really good squares. Besides, they have a development problem here, and it's not clear how they can solve it, because my rook is very active attacking that pawn, so the bishop cannot move so easily. So we should say that the compensation exists here. I played queen e2, and the idea is that I'm improving the other rook. It can go to b1 or d1 in the next turns, but also I'm looking at b5, so maybe at some point I could be playing rook b5 and going to the king side with this idea over the fifth rank. That's probably why he played a6 here. I just continued improving my pieces, rook d1, and at this point my opponent made a blunder. Actually, the best move is probably knight a5 and try to continue improving and surviving. Instead of that, he played b5, and this is a blunder in this position. The main problem is the knight is going to be a dependent piece now. It's very easy for me to attack the queen, but also there is a pain over here, so black is in trouble after this move. For example, I could have played here bishop b3, and this is just winning the game. If he plays queen c4, I just trade queens, and then I play rook b6, and getting one piece for free here. However, I found something different, and this is going to end up with a fantastic combination. I played here knight e5. I saw the pin and I said, well, I'm going to put more pieces over there. So knight e5 looks fine. My opponent thought, okay, I cannot move the knight because my rook is behind, but if I move the knight attacking the queen, then it's going to be fine. So he just played here knight d4. He's getting my queen on e2. At this point, it is white to move, and white is winning the game. I will explain it very soon, but I think it's going to be a good training for a London system player to try to find the way to win here as white. Okay, the move I played in this position was the sacrifice on h7, bishop takes pawn. And the idea is that I'm going to open the h file, and then my queen and my rook are both going over there. So after king takes h7, queen h5, the king has to go back to g8, and then rook a3. Now I'm threatening queen h7 or queen h8. f6 or f5 are not working because the knight is controlling f7, so there is nothing black can play here, only some useless checks. So this position is winning for white. Mate is unstoppable, and my opponent resigned here. If you guys have any question, let me know in the comments. If you want to learn how to master calculation in chess, check out this interesting video with the best calculation techniques. I'm sure you will enjoy it and it will help you a lot. Thank you so much guys, like, subscribe, see you on the next.